Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lallo.
And we've got a great guest for you this week, Jonathan Brazee. He is a retired Marine colonel and now a full-time writer living in Las Vegas, Nevada. He published his first work back in 1978, a short story called Succession. Since then, he's been published in newspapers, magazines, and in book format in fiction, political science, business, military, sports, race relations, and personal relations. In 2014, he published his first The United Federation Marine Corps novel, and he's since published 8 in the series and several spin-off series. Are you laughing, Jeff? Do not laugh at me reading the introductions. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and it sounds like you've been writing for most of your life. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into it and your road and what led you eventually to self-publishing your military sci-fi stories?
Well, I wrote a short story in 1978 that was published by an academic magazine. That was sci-fi. And once I got commissioned in the Marine Corps, my writing turned to nonfiction in a lot of different areas. And I got published quite a bit, including one book on the tuna industry. Not too exciting. When I was in Iraq, I had to curtail my running because if you run, they shoot you. And since I had a lot of free time, I decided to write my novel. Wrote a novel, military fiction, had no intent on ever publishing it, really. I just wanted copies to give to my family. So I actually went with a vanity press, paid $470 for 20 copies, gave them all away. Didn't really realize the vanity press was going to put it on Amazon, and actually got a few royalty checks, got up to $98 in royalty checks. And then in 2012, I think it was, I was at the United Airlines Lounge in LAX, and I saw a Kindle for the first time. I told the guy, hey, I've got a Kindle. And I've got a book on Kindle. And he looked it up and said, no, you don't. And I called up the vanity press, and they said, oh, that's because you didn't pay another $90. At that time, I kind of heard about independent self-publishing. So I just put it up myself, sold 400 copies the first month, 700 the next, and then people started wanting more books. I killed off half the people in the first book, so it's kind of hard to do a second one, but I managed to do that. And it was a nice little side job until 2014. And then things just kind of took off for me. And I've got 33 novels, I think it is right now, about 54 titles. And today, I found out that today the words came out for the 2017 Nebulas. And one of my novelettes, Weaponized Math, actually made the final cut, is on the ballot for the Nebulas. So that's kind of culminating my writing career on the day that I have this podcast, which is also my birthday.
So you're having an excellent day so far. I mean, you get to be on our show, Nebula Nomination.
Yep.
Excellent. That's great. Congratulations on the novelette. Is that kind of like 8,000 words to 17,000 words?
7,500 words, I think, with SFWA, Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, according to theirs. And it goes up to about 17,000, I believe. I could be off on that.
Yeah, that's actually probably a good idea to write some stuff in like that length or novella, because they have categories for all that. I imagine it's super competitive in the novel stuff. But,
short stories are where it's competitive. Mm-hmm. There were over 100 short stories on the readers list. Very difficult to make it. Novelettes and novellas were a little bit easier. Novels were difficult, but hey, I'm just happy. I'm really, really happy today.
No,
I was
that's
actually
awesome.
told about it on Friday when I was at Capricorn, and I immediately had to go into a panel where we discussed, among other things, awards, and I couldn't say anything. People were saying no, indies can't get an award.
Well, that's what I'm curious about, because until a few years ago, you could only get into SFWA with like some pro sales or a novel sold to a major publisher. We had a guest on a couple years ago that was on their board and let us know things are changing, but how are you involved? Because I know you're kind of in there too, and what is it looking like these days for indie authors?
We're getting more and more indies. I was actually the second indie to be accepted. I had heard about it, that it was going to come up, and on the very morning that it was open, I put in my numbers. It took just 1 month of one of my book. That's all I sent in. You've got to make, for a novel, you got to make $3,000 within the course of a year. I was the second indie accepted. I immediately started volunteering for SFWA. I am now the chairman of the education committee, and I'm running for director at large. So I'll see how that goes. We are going to have one indie who's going to be the CFO, someone named Nathan Lowell. But if I make director, I'll be the only other indie. Cat Rambo has made a big effort to welcome everybody. When I first walked into the SFWA suite in Spokane, I was, very nervous. I'm the imposter sneaking in, and Cat Rambo just came over and gave me a big giant hug, welcomed me there. And I sat down, and there was Eric Flint sitting right across from me, and I'm, oh wow, that's Eric Flint. And I look over here, here's Mike Resnick. A moment later, Jerry Parnell and Larry Niven walk in, and I'm very quiet. I'm not saying a word. But then a guy named Alex Schwartzman said, hey, are you going to Mike Resnick's party? And I'm not invited. He said, you are now. Come with me. So they're very, very welcoming. There's been a lot of high-powered indies I've been joining. I noticed you just got your membership renewed. Michael Anderley, Craig Martell, a lot of people are joining. Richard Fox.
All right, so I know that SFWA SFWA has had a lot of presence at larger conventions in the past, and you mentioned convention just now. Are they still sort of useful for people who go to conventions a lot?
Absolutely. I'm actually in the middle of getting a 3-book contract with a pretty important company, a publisher, and I got it because of the Nebula conference and Eric Flint. I've had other contract offers which I've turned down. They weren't good enough for me to give up my indie freedom and money, but I got them, and I've had agents coming after me. I've been speaking at WorldCon, DragonCon, Mile High Con. I just did 10 panels over the weekend at Capricorn. I'll be a guest of honor at SphinxCon, which was a total shock to me that anybody would ask for me. The conventions, besides being fun, they're just a great place to meet other writers who know what you're going through, and it's a great place to network.
Yeah, I know that's something that like SFWA really offers, and something a lot of indie authors really lack is the opportunity to network and just be introduced to other people. So that does seem like the sort of an excellent motivation to join an organization like SFWA. I
believe so. It's well worth the effort, and networking is really, really good. It's opened up a lot of windows for me. Excuse me, a lot of doors. I go through doors, not windows. But even one of the contracts that I turned down, it got me into 2 book bundles. The publisher said, well, if you're not going to do the book with us, we understand why. Can you do a book bundle? And that was with, John Ringo, Jody Lanai, Kevin Anderson, and that gave me a lot of visibility. I even had a guy at DragonCon buy every single paperback that I had brought because he had read one of my books through the book bundle, and he doesn't like Amazon. So when he saw the paperbacks, he bought every single one.
Nice. That's the best way to pick up fans there. I'm also a member of SFWA, and actually my membership is coming up within the next couple of months. And one thing I like about them is I know they have a number of resources available to help out authors. And one I really liked hearing about was the access to a legal team should you ever have a problem with, let's just say, big name retailers. Are there any of those resources do you use on a regular basis?
I haven't, because I've only had, as far as fiction, I've only got currently 2 things that have been published with a publisher. I'm having more, but the contract is going to go over to the contract committee to make sure certain things happen. I've already talked with, I had a meeting with them in London, and I've told them what I want, but I'm not a contract expert, so I'm going to be giving it to the contract committee. But I just saw emails today. I just got a message today about somebody who had a problem with a foreign publisher. That got fixed because of the intervention by SFWA. SFWA is very, very good at getting things like rights to your backlist back, taking care of problems with publishers who don't pay, putting pressure on them. I read the forum all the time, and I'm in a Facebook group with a lot of people. They go out of their way to make sure the writer is protected.
All right, very cool. So people can check that out if they qualify and if they're interested. We better ask you some questions about your bread and butter here, about military sci-fi and your books. You've actually done the thing we kind of advise people to do, but the three of us do not do, which is write in one specific kind of subgenre. And not only that, but all your series seem to tie back into your first series. Could you tell us if that was planned or you know, like marketing genius, or it's just that's what you wanted to write?
Well, I also have a straight science fiction. I've got paranormal, but my better paranormal is my military paranormal, historical fiction. Except for the military paranormal, they've made back the money, but not a whole lot. My military, I have a military fiction series that takes place in the near future, but it's not science fiction. That's done very, very well for me. But that's been out for over 5 years now. But my key, or what really exploded for me, where I was able to make a living and quit my job, was the military sci-fi. So now in my first series, I have my first universe. I have 23 books. I am very anxious to, the series that I'm talking about publishing with a publisher is a brand new universe. People keep asking for books in the other series, but I kind of painted myself into a universe. My universe painted me into a corner where I was sort of limited on what I could do from a military standpoint. So I'm very, very excited about this new one. But the novelette that got the nomination, that was because people were clamoring to hear more of one of my characters, a sniper named Gracie Medicine Crow. And quite frankly, a lot of my fans fell in love with her, and they keep asking for more and more and more. So I've written 3 novelettes on her, this one getting the nomination.
Yeah, I saw you actually have a little, I guess, a trilogy or 3 books in kind of a women's of the Marine United Federation Marine Corps.
United Federation Marine Corps, and Gracie is the sniper in there. I didn't think she'd be that popular because she's a little bit standoffish, kind of holds her emotions in check, but she's the one that the guys like. I thought they'd like maybe the corpsman, who's kind of a personable, you know, likes to go out and party a little bit. No, they like Gracie. And but those 3 series, those 3 books have done very well for me. I've had a lot of contact from women who served in the military, and they happen to love these books, at least the ones that contact me. They like the fact that the women aren't out there fighting in knee-high boots and a thong when the men are in armor next to them. These are real women, real Marines that all passed the Bechtel test, and I got a lot of female fans have written me saying it's good to see somebody who writes women like they really are in the military.
Very cool. And could you tell us what that test is for those who aren't familiar with it, about the female characters?
The Bechtel test, and I may not get this exactly right, the Bechtel test is, I think it was originally for movies and TV shows, but it's gone into books, is that if 2 women are talking for 2 minutes, they believe it's 2 minutes, and they say nothing about a man. So there's no, it's about them and it's about what they normally talk. And Bechtel was actually a person who designed this test, and it's kind of been, I didn't even know what it was till people started writing me and saying, hey, I'm glad your book's passed the Bechtel test.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I often write romance in my stories, but still, like I like to see female relationships that are about other things than that, because that's often what you get is like the character just thrown into like, let's
Yeah,
talk about the male lead.
how handsome he is and how whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And do you have any tips for maybe newer authors who are wanting to get into the military sci-fi area? Like what kind of things they should make sure to include in their stories?
Just like romance, military sci-fi has trope rules. I found this out. If you're doing Space Marines, you cannot make the Space Marines be bad guys. Marines are good guys. And if you don't make them good guys, that's like a romance that's not a happily ever after. You're going to hear about it. And I did that with one of my books on the side. The Marines weren't even the bad guys. They were actually pretty good, but they were the opposing force. And I had people who said, I don't read these books to have the Marines be the bad guys. But that's Space Marines. But there's a lot more to military fiction that you can do. So what I would do is, if you have not had military experience, make sure you read other books first. Make sure you talk to people who have served and that's somewhere where like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, go down to your post, the local post, and ask people for stories. Ask them, and they will grab a hold of you. They'll handcuff you to the bar, and they won't let you go till every single one of them has regaled you with an hour's worth of stories. Rarely has to do with actual fighting, but it has to do with the little things that makes military life manageable. And those are the things that are, in my opinion, are important to put in your book, to put in your novel, because they give a sense of verisimilitude. They give a sense of, oh, I knew that guy. He was a sergeant in my unit in Vietnam. And these are the things that bring the military readers in.
Now, you're sort of on this topic, but science fiction in general seems to attract a lot of people who are more willing to nitpick than in other genres, and I've got to imagine that military sci-fi is particularly susceptible to that. So do you find even on matters of sci-fi, you tend to have a lot of people having a very strong opinion on how you've handled it?
Yes. I've been told don't give up my day job and don't try to write about something I don't even know about. Then I had other people jump over and say, hey, this guy was a colonel. This guy's been in combat. But people believe, one of my books, I had the fact that they had made a still to get alcohol, and was told flat out that would never happen in the military. And anybody who's ever been on a Navy ship knows that they're making like prison wine, and stuff like that. It happens, but people think they know. But there is most military science fiction takes place way in the future. My books take place about 800 years in the future. They want the military to be the military of today with fancy weapons. They want the ranks to be correct. You do not call a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant a sergeant. You don't call a captain of you could call a captain of a ship a skipper. These are these rules that they want to have. I have a friend of mine who wrote a very good, it sold very well, military book where he had the officers had Navy ranks, modern day Navy ranks. The enlisted had modern day Marine Corps ranks. Oh, he was just castigated because you don't do that. I don't remember how many, it was 500 years in the future or something. But he was just jumped on by lots of reviews saying that he was wrong. Well, if we go back 500 years ago, we didn't have any of the ranks we have today. Heck, the magic Marine Corps rank is gunnery sergeant. Didn't have it till 1958. But the people want to feel comfortable, and they want to have today's Navy, today's Army, today's Marine Corps, today's Air Force. Coast Guard, if you want to make a friend, do a Coast Guard book. They like that because they're kind of left out. You can't believe how many coasties I've had write me because I had a Coast Guard guy in a book. But they want it, today's military, in spaceships and battle armor.
Yeah, you can't discredit, though, what the fans actually expect. Because as a fantasy author, I've had the same sort of thing where people are telling me, oh, well, that sort of thing just wouldn't happen. It would be this, this, and this. I'm like, dude, fiction. Not nonfiction, fiction. I can make up the own dang rules, my own darn world. Do you mind? But that kind of leads me to my question is what, if any, have you found to be the most difficult obstacle to overcome when you self-pubbed your book? Was it trying to overcome what these readers' expectations are?
No, I think that is something that's inherent to trad published and indie. In fact, I've read better books by, well, Ringo does a good job, John Ringo. But I think I've read better military fiction, like Craig Martell's and people like that, Richard Fox, who are indies, than self-published. The hard part is going through the process that everybody has when you self-publish, whether it's military science fiction or anything else, is getting the editors, getting the cover. And my covers in the beginning were horrible, just horrible. But covers, editors, the book, my novelette that was actually published in the Expanding Universe 3, when I get it ready to send in so it can be downloaded for people to vote, first thing I do is I see a typo on the first page. It just jumped out at me. I think it bred overnight or something. So it's the publishing aspects which I think are the most difficult. And of course, not just for the production, but the marketing. And I'm not a great marketer. I had sold over 120,000 books before someone said, "Hey, how big's your mailing list?" And I went, "Mailing list?
What mailing list?" Yeah, I did something similar.
So it's those things that I'm not. I mean, those are, I think, the harder things. Writing is easy. It's publishing. It's the publishing part of self-publishing that is more difficult, in my opinion.
All right. Well, since you mentioned mailing lists, I guess we can segue into the marketing section of our show. I will say the fantasy equivalent is if you get castles wrong, like if you're writing about castles and don't label the little, I can't even remember everything, crenellations and the name of the front door, gate.
Hey, don't try to change a dragon's flame color either. Man, you get killed on that one too. It's supposed to be red, an orange. Who the heck has green or blue? I'm like, really? Go away.
You got to be accurate with your dragons. You got to be scientifically
That's
accurate.
right. Real dragons. These have to be based on real dragons. Well, let me ask, because you launched a new series, it looks like, back in October or so, the Grub Wars Book 1, also in your same world. Have you found it harder to do well in military sci-fi lately? Because I know a lot of people kind of jumped in there after Chris Fox wrote his right-to-market book and highlighted the genre, so to say. What are your thoughts on how it is today, starting out or starting?
Oh, I think it's harder. My Recruit, which was my first military sci-fi, I believe Amazon had 694 books in the subgenre. In Space Marines, it's bigger than just that. They have fleet and all that kind of stuff. I think now there's like 4,000 or 5,000 books. So yeah, it's harder to get eyes on what you have. But if you cast a big enough net, people are going to find you. And if you capture them when they read, they're going to stick with you. They will seek you out.
Have you tried any things like, I see you're in Kindle Unlimited with your stuff, doing the free runs, free book 1 for a few days, or like, what are you trying for that kind of thing to keep the series selling over the months and years?
I have not done the perma-free. But what I have done is I have done the Kindle, different marketing things you can do with Kindle to push particularly book 1. I also push my standalone books, which are not exactly, I mean, they're related to a series. They're going to, except for one, they're going to interact with people who are in other series, but they're not part of a broader arc. So I push those books to try to bring them in. I also have some of those books wide to try to get bigger eyes on them. Most of my books are are select. I think I have 6 books that are wide, and I do little tests, but every time I keep coming back to select.
All right, so you've got a lot of books out, and we're talking about how you've got a few different series, but you've got sort of the bread and butter series. When you're planning out a set of books, like how many books at a time do you plan out? Do you do one at a time, or do you have sort of an idea for an arc?
I've got a series arc, but if you look at the UFMC, the United Federation Marine Corps series, that was supposed to be 5 books. I kind of knew where I wanted to go, but the problem is my fans wouldn't let me. They kept saying, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen when he's a lieutenant colonel or battalion commander? That's going to be so exciting. What's going to happen? And I was like, I don't know. I hadn't gone that far. And my last book was supposed to be 2 books. My last 2 books were supposed to be 1 book, but it just wasn't going to fit in there. So that book grew to 8. Every other, the Lysander twins, which were the twin children of the protagonists in the first series, that was supposed to be 4, but that grew to be 5 because once again, people started asking and say, well, what's she going to do now? So I had to find, I already had an idea of what she was going to do, but I didn't have a book. It was going to be just part of another book. And so that kind of grew. The fans changed my last book in the first series. I started having second thoughts, really second thoughts, because I knew what was going to happen from the very, very beginning. And I actually went to my mailing list and I said, hey, anybody want to weigh in on this? It's spoiler alert. And I sent it out, and 78 people said, yes, tell us and we'll help you. 75 people said, no, don't do it. 3 people said, well, if you gotta, do it. So I know people say, you're the artist, it's your book, it's your universe, do what you want to do. No, I changed it. And I went, although it kind of looked like I wasn't going to go their way, which a lot of them told me, they were saying, son of a gun, he didn't pay attention to us. But I did change the last part of the book. And I had something planned because I thought it had to be there. So basically, it got faked.
Nice. It's good to know that I'm not the only one who lets the inmates run the asylum on that sort of thing.
They're who are customers. They're our readers. They're who we're writing for.
Absolutely.
So we gotta read for them.
I guess before I hand you off, that's obviously what the audience is looking for, and the audience is obviously the ones buying the books. But if you find that the most vocal audience members are clamoring for something, but the sales numbers aren't there, does that change your decision, or you still try to satisfy the super fans?
I think I try to satisfy the super fans. I do pay attention to the bottom line. I've got a couple other books that people have been asking me. But, if I'm only going to make, $3,000-$4,000 on a book, or I'm going to make $15,000 or $20,000, kind of stick with the ones that more people are asking for. I've got 2 series or 2 books that people keep on asking me for another book because they really like them, but neither one made a particularly large amount of money. And I want to do it, but other things interfere. And now I'm doing, collaborations, and more and more demands on my time, and so these other 2 books keep getting pushed back and back and back a little bit.
Okay, so are you the type of writer who follows an outline, or do you prefer to write the story as it develops?
Write it as it develops. I had to do an outline for the publisher, and that was harder than writing anything. First he said, "Oh, just give me, a couple pages, let me know what's happening." So I did that, and I sent it in, and he goes, "I don't know what's happening. Where's the emotion? Where's the growth?" I went, "Oh, you just told me to do this." So I ended up doing a 7,000, 8,000 word outline. No, I'm a pantser. I know my arc. I know where I'm going. I fill it in at the gym, believe it or not. I go to the gym, I lift my weights, and as soon as I get done, I pace back and forth, and I've got my phone in my pocket. I'm like, that's a good one. That's how I fix this. And I make my little notes, and I've only once not understood what the heck I said after I got back. And my notes have been pretty good.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I think of whenever I'm working out, I can always think of good ideas, but I know not to try and record myself because I don't need to hear, oh my God, and then I want to do this. So it doesn't ever work there. But so if you don't map everything out or plot everything out, have you ever written yourself into a corner?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I do really details on what I'm doing. Before I landscape my yard, I moved from Thailand to Las Vegas, and my side yard was just dirt or sand. I'd make sand tables like we do in the military to plot out all my battles and everything like that. And that kind of helps me keep things in line. I don't put all that in the book, but I know that this unit is this far from this unit and it has to support this unit and et cetera, et cetera. But things like that, which I do, tend to keep me in line, I think. But it's not something I do beforehand. I do it as I need it. The only thing I have done is several times I've quit a battle just because battles are hard to write. And I quit a battle and then gone on because I know where it's going to end, and then come back to it with fresh eyes later. So it's not really writing myself into a corner, but I've had to leave things before.
I'm notorious for skipping the climactic battle halfway through having written it and like, ooh, the epilogue sounds really fun to write now because I love dialogue, so that's always my thing. But hear you on the synopsis for the publisher. It's nice that we don't have to do that when we self-publish.
Oh man, you know, and a lot of people ask me, why the heck am I doing this with the publisher? But to be honest, it was Eric Flint who talked me into it. He said one of the weaknesses of being an indie is you don't tend to improve yourself because you're not getting the feedback and guidance. And I had to think of some of my editors, and I had to agree with him. They seemed to be afraid of telling me I've done something wrong, or they would recommend something different. I had one of my editors sent me an email saying, I don't think this little section here is working. And then 15 minutes later, I get an email saying, but that's just my opinion. And then another 10 minutes, but I love working with you. I hope we can still work together. I know some people have really good editors, but I haven't found them like that. And so this idea of being able to develop into a better writer, plus there's the advantages of better access into bookstores. And this publisher is very big into graphic novels and movies and TV shows and all that kind of stuff. And I talked to two writers who had gone to them from other writers, and they were both very, very, very happy. One was actually a Naval Academy grad from the class before me, so I got to trust him.
Definitely. Wouldn't do you wrong. So I think that's a great point that not only getting good feedback like that, but getting your books into like Barnes and Noble and stuff. It's still a different fan, potential people out there that don't read like indie ebooks. And, there's nothing wrong with trying to cultivate a larger audience, and then maybe some more of them will come across and read your indie stuff too.
I won't, that's a big reason. I'm not abandoning self-publishing. Believe me, most of my books this year are going to be self-published. It was just for the experience, I think.
Now, for the covers that you do for your sci-fi, military sci-fi, I've noticed you've got some are kind of the classic ship covers, but you do a lot with characters, and that seems a little different. Like usually I see like, what is it, Michael Cooper's like spaceship ass is like what sells books.
Tiny.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on covers that work well?
Well, Michael Cooper's work, but I don't do them. My initial covers with my military fiction were they were basically the Marine Corps emblem on different background, very easy. Then I hired an artist in Thailand who I thought was great. People hated my covers. I have reviews that say, ignore the cover. The book is actually good. And so then I tried to redo my whole first series, got taken to the cleaners. Now I've got some horrible covers. I'm trying to get them redone again. I don't know if there's really going to be that big of an ROI, but just for self-pride. But starting with my Women of the United Federation Marine Corps, I hired a pretty well-known, award-winning artist from Taiwan told her what I wanted, and she basically did it. The first cover is not quite what I wanted, but it turned out working out really well. I actually incorporated some of that in the book. I pay for the artwork. I pay for the artist. I've got 2 artists that I hire to do unique and original artwork based on the novel, and then I hire somebody else to do the graphics. I think the last 5, 4, 9, 12, 13, 14, I think I've got 14 good covers based on those books. I think the cover is very important, and there's self-pride. I just want the best that I can do. I want it out there. I want it to look the best. And people now like the new covers. They still hate the old ones.
I've got some like that too. There weren't that many cover designers out there when I got started. I'm starting to feel old. You like had to go on DeviantArt or something and try to find someone. And yeah, I've been gradually redoing some of the old ones too.
I'm redoing one right now from a book that doesn't sell very well. So I'm sure the ROI is not going to be there, but I'm doing it also as a test to see how a relaunch will work from something that's been published, for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. And if you've had like a book bub in the past, I think refreshing the covers now and then can maybe just kind of attract a different audience, and maybe they didn't click on it last time, but this time, oh yeah, that might work for them.
We'll see. I hope so. But at least I'll have a better looking book.
That's always a good thing to have. Especially when you're doing all the conventions. I imagine you take some books along to show off, and you don't want some self-published looking book out there.
At Helsinki, in Helsinki, they had actually a table for indie writers where you paid 50 cent euro to put the book on the table, and that they would sell them for whatever they sold it for and give you whatever it brought in. And my good covers went within an hour, all of them. The bad ones took a day and a half. But even then, I was just so surprised that every book I brought and because of that, I was in the green room with George Martin, and there were 3 other people, and we're just kind of chatting, and then he had to leave to go do his book signing, and his handler had to go to the restroom or something. So we're standing at the door of the green room, and I see somebody walking all the way down the hall with a book in his hand, very determined look, and I'm thinking, geez, give the guy a break. He's going to go sit down and sign 2,000 autographs. Just leave him alone. But I kind of stepped to the side. It was somebody who had picked up my book and was searching me out. And I was just like, oh my gosh, signed that. And if I had more guts, I would have turned to George and said something to the fact that, too bad you don't have fans tracking you down.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It's kind of hard to be snarky to the the bestseller, big name people out there.
People ask me, they said, well, did you talk about Game of Thrones with him? No. I wasn't going to bring it up.
Well, now that you've done so many novels and you've kind of seen what's worked, it sounds like you have a mailing list now. What does a book launch look like for you?
Basically, all I do is I tell my mailing list, I put it on my website, and I send it out on my Facebook page. If I do a pre-order, and I've done pre-orders, my initial day is a little bit less. If I don't do a pre-order, then I get a big jump the first day. It drops down for about 3 or 4 days, and then that's when it starts taking off. I think that's when it gets promulgated to all the different various websites, not just Amazon. I'm not sure of that, but I start seeing my books pop up on websites I've never even heard of, and all pointing to Amazon.
Now, how crucial is it that a book have a good launch? Like, if a book does not launch well, is there a recovery option?
Yes. My Women of the United Federation Marine Corps, I was a little bit disappointed on the first book. And it's such a beautiful cover. And I love the story, but it didn't have a Marine Corps name. It's called Gladiator. That's not very Marine Corps, even though it had, the big sword fight and the alien and everything else. I love the cover. In fact, that's on my business card, part of that cover. I was a little disappointed. It was selling, but not great. And then the second book came out, which was Sniper. Sniper took off, and then Gladiator followed. It had a better, I was going to say Resurrection. Forget Resurrection. It had a whole new life, a bigger life. It took off because of Sniper. People read Sniper and they said, well, wait a minute, there's another book. And they grabbed that one too. But the initial launch was okay. Not what I'd hoped. I like to recover, all my costs within a couple days, if that long. It didn't. But since then, it has done quite well. And then the third book was probably the weakest of the three. And once again, these are not book one, book two, book three. These were three separate books that intersected each other. So all three characters were appearances in the other one, but it was not sequential or anything.
So when you're ready to release a new title, do you do any advertising or any sort of pushing for your older titles in an effort to increase sales, or do you just focus on the one you're releasing?
It depends. If I'm doing a series, I will start hitting the first book again. So if I'm doing book 4, I'm releasing book 4, I will do something with book 1 to try to bump up the sales, just to get more visibility.
I mean, do you have like any box sets or anything that you have on your site?
No, I'm sorry. I do box sets that do very well for me. I do omnibus versions. My best-selling book is a trilogy, and it's made more money for me than anything, including my Military Sci-Fi. But it's the trilogy of my first 3 books. Now, part of it is because it's been around a long. Part of it is because it has been the most reactive to my AMS ads. I'm getting 40% of the, what is it, APOC, whatever it is, whatever the term is, for the return on the money spent, and that's not including that's not including KU, or it's not including the paperback. It just happens to be the one that gets the most reaction from my advertising dollar. And that's 6 years old almost, 5, 6 years old. I guess 6 years old. But it's been advertising has affected that more than anything else that I've written.
Do you think it's because it's a really good deal for people? You've got 3 books in one ebook, it sounds like.
I think that's part of it, but I think certain subjects work better than others for advertising. And this is so very Marine Corps. So I'm getting people who are military readers. I'm getting people who are military sci-fi readers. I'm getting people who aren't really military readers, but they knew they had a kid in the Marine Corps. I think it's just, and it's very emblematic. I think it's just the thumbnail and the ad itself catches the eye. And it has had a second life. It had been, sold really well over the years. I mean, when I'm saying really well, there are people like you, Lindsay, who have sold much better than I have. But for me, it has sold very well. And it had started coming down. Then when I started the AMS ads, it just came back up. And I could just count on it for a couple grand a month for a 6-year-old book.
Yeah, it's great. And it's I always tell people, like, it's hard to know, even after like publishing 30 or 40 books, which ones are actually going to really resonate with people and take off. Because I know in my case, I've definitely had ones where I thought like, oh yeah, this is such a cool cover and this is a great story, and they do okay. But then it'll be one where you're like, wow, this is just kind of a throwaway trilogy or something. And it turns out selling really well.
Takes off. I've been really surprised about Gracie Medicine Crow. She's earned me. I could pay for my Tesla, so that's worthwhile.
That's a good selling book. Those aren't cheap. So I was actually going to ask you kind of how you've managed to keep, like, your original sci-fi series, sci-fi military series is still selling well with the 8 books, even though it's been, I guess, complete for a while. It sounds like you're doing Amazon ads. What all are you kind of trying to throw out there to keep the older series selling?
Writing new series of the same universe. Every time I put out, I've got, let me see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 series. Wait a minute. Hold on a second, please. UFMC, the Lysander Twins, Women of the United Federation Marine Corps, Alliance. Okay, 4 series, I guess, in that universe. And that's 23 books. And every time one comes out, Recruit, which is number 1, bumps up, the sales bump up. So I think that is a huge impact. Just keep on writing and getting more books out there, more books within your recent releases. And then when you're running out of the recent releases because you haven't finished a book in a month, then you put the trilogy. I'm putting out a trilogy today of my last 3 books, and that brings me back up into the front. I do AMS ads. If you want to talk Facebook ads, I'm not the person. Go talk to Michael Cooper. I have not been successful with Facebook ads. And I don't do them right now until I figure out what was I doing wrong before.
All right. Now, talking about your series, you talked a bit about this before, but it sounds like when the time comes to make a decision about your series and what to write next, you're mostly listening to your fans. But like when you start writing your new series, or you extend an old series, what do you do to make sure that they stay fresh, like as opposed to potentially letting an idea get stale?
That's one of the reasons why I'm going to a new universe. I had these ideas. I had my whole big arc. And I think within that arc, I stayed pretty fresh because I went in it from a different viewpoint. You know, I had my initial stereotypical Marine from private to general in the first series. And I was able to put enough realism in all of these, I think, to keep people interested. You know, my next series was completely different. It was 3 different women from 3 different aspects going in. On my 3rd series, I went into I expanded beyond infantry. I went heavy into recon, which I personally knew well because I served in recon in the Marine Corps. But then I went into tanks, which I didn't. But I put a lot of real tank battles in there. One of the keys that I've had with writing military science fiction is that most of what I've written is true. It may not be to one person. And of course, it's 700 years from now, and you're fighting whatever instead of a historical enemy. But when you do that, you tend to, to me, it seems to keep it fresh. When the publisher looked at one of my books to see whether Eric was right or he was blowing smoke up, you know what, he called me and said, you know, I read that first chapter. That was so real. Well, yeah, it was real. It happened to Colonel John Ripley, and he got a Navy Cross for it. It was very real. But that, I think, kept things fresh. I'm looking for inspiration from different things. I watched when I was in Thailand, they limit the television you get. So there's a lot of History Channel, the real History Channel, not Oak Island and Bigfoot and stuff, but real history. And I took a lot of inspiration from there that people tend to like a lot. And I just transplant it. And then I like to give little history lessons, real history lessons within my books. One of the things that people like that kept as a way to keep things fresh, even if you're going over some of the same things, is that in my Marine Corps, which was a formed from all the extant Marine Corps at the time, which most were on Earth, but a few were from different planets, is that each battalion was adopted by what they called a patron unit. So one battalion was the United States Marine Corps, one battalion is the Mexican Marine Corps, and so on and so forth. So that gave me a way to to bring in a celebration and extol the history of the Portuguese Marines, which were the first Marines. King Charles, who started that. And I talked a lot. I've got quite a few people in the UK, so I had real Marine Corps, real Royal Marine heroes. I'm naming Camp Pretty John, for example, after them. So none of that affects the actual battle, which is what people want to see, what people want to read. But it gives everything a little bit different flavor and a little bit different direction from which to look. And I think that helps keep it fresh.
So how many books did you say you've published so far? I
think, not including the translations, I think I've got 53, 54 titles of fiction. I don't know how many nonfiction, but a lot of those were in journals and magazines and newspapers and stuff. But those are omnibus versions, like the trilogy. Those are novelettes, a couple shorts. Yeah, I think it's 53 or 54. And I think that is 33 standalone novels.
So after having released that many, I have to ask you, is there anything you've noticed that more authors should be doing but aren't, that could have the potential to increase sales? I mean, is there anything you wish that you should have been doing? You already touched on mailing lists, like most of us here typically have not jumped into the mailing list early enough.
I should have done that a lot earlier. And I should have advertised earlier, because my growth, even though my first book kind of did really well, my growth has been steady and slow as people read, and then they find me on their own, and then that brings them into my other books. Someone read my military fiction and then says, well, I like that, but he wrote a werewolf of Marines? You got to be kidding me. But let me give it a shot. And then they like it. So I was just waiting for people, I was casting a big net and waiting for the fish to swim in. And once they're in, they're kind of caught into my pool, and they're going to read other things. I should have advertised. I should have done AMS. I should have done these things earlier to jumpstart my career earlier instead of letting it slowly grow. And I think it's only going to get worse as more and more books are put out there, more and more authors are put out there. I think it's getting harder and harder to be found. And that's one of the reasons why I just did a panel at Capricorn in Chicago this last weekend. I was talking to people about, I made a presentation on collaborations, because that is a great way for a new writer to gain the visibility, to get their name out there. Because if you do a book, with Michael Anderle, and it's got your name and Michael Anderle's, there are a lot of people going to read it, and they're going to see your name, and they're going to know your name. At some point, you have a name for yourself. You've got a readership. Now you can take it and go which any direction you want. I think collaborations are a very good way for new writers to get their toes wet.
Do you think you need to have written a couple books first to kind of prove yourself and approach somebody like that and say, like, hey, here's a sample of my writing?
I think you could just do a sample of your writing. If you have a short story, if you have a novel, if you have a novelette, anything that you've done, and you can approach somebody. You don't have to approach the people at the top of the list. You could approach anybody that's got a readership and offer, you're going to be doing the grunt work. That person is going to be developing with you, is going to read it, going to adjust things, acting like a developmental editor. I don't know. Different people are going to, like, some people I know get very involved and almost rewrite the book. Other people adjust it, make their recommendations. But if you are a decent writer, I think a lot of authors, established authors, would be willing to do it. And the advantage is, when I talk to people in romance, a lot of people are ghostwriters. And unless you just want to make $3,000, I cannot see ghostwriting, because your name never goes out there. You're not developing your own brand. But if you could find someone who's willing to give you co-author credit, and your name is on that book, I think that is a good way to jumpstart your name and get people to read it. Of course, the other way is to write The Martian and just break out on your own, and all the more power to you if you can do that. But I do think co-authoring with name credit is one valid way for new authors to break through the static.
Yeah, it's tough out there, and I always tell people, you got to be patient. Like, I know Michael Anderle started his book with his group with the idea of writing 20 books before getting to maybe 50,000 a year in income, and so that's not just each book. It's like each one is a chance to, because like we were talking about, not everything you write is just gonna be great and hit it off with people. And sometimes it's one of your weaker books may be the one the one that takes off. But I feel like patience is really important out there right now, no matter what you try. And
that's a very good point. And I have talked to people at conventions who said, I wrote 2 books and I thought they were great. I know they were great. I'm a good writer, and they didn't sell, so I quit. I don't know a whole lot of people that actually broke through on their first book. I think you really do have to have patience. And if you believe in yourself, if you believe that you're a good writer, and even if your mother says you're a good writer, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but if you believe you are, you've just got to keep on plugging. The more you have out there, that is the best marketing that you can do.
Definitely. And I'm going to ask you, because sounds like you've written quite a bit here in just a few years, how important do you think that is for a newer writer? Because not many people that are still working their day job are going to be able to do like 8 novels a year. Do you feel like that's necessary right now, or just an advantage if you can write quickly, or do you just need to have patience if maybe you're doing 2 a year?
It's not necessary. I know people who have achieved various levels of success with 1 book a year, 2 books a year, 1 book every 2 years. I talked to several people this last weekend who are doing okay. But it depends. You have to know what to expect. Karen Herkes, who is a friend of mine, she stresses the fact that you have to have expectations, but understand what those expectations are. If you want to make 7 figures a year and retire and go buy a house on the French Riviera, unless you're very, very lucky, you better pump out some books. If you are looking to have people read your books and enjoy them and make a little bit extra, maybe make that car payment, maybe have a couple nice meals out at the restaurant, you can do that with 1 book a year. And maybe you'll get lucky with 1 book a year anyway. Maybe that's the one that's going to hit. So you have to understand what your expectations are. And I see people out writing online, well, is this good? I sold 100 books. Is this good? Am I successful? It's what's successful for you. It's what your expectations are. If you had told me when I went to that vanity press, remember I went to iUniverse. I did everything everyone says, oh my gosh, you're never supposed to do that. If you had ever told me when I paid $470 to iUniverse for 20 copies of my book that I would be able to make a car payment with my writing, I would have been jumping up and down for joy. That is success. Success is having people read your books. How many books, how much money you make, how many awards you get, hey, that's all individual. And just go in there with a reasonable attitude. I think writing a lot of books is a big, big advantage. And remember, you don't have to write 200,000 word tomes. I know people right now who are selling a lot of books, and their books are all 50,000 words. I know one person who is roundly criticized on the KDP boards, the Amazon boards for writers, because he was writing 20,000 word books that he put out every 2 weeks, and with the same cover, without editing. Everybody told him he was crazy. I told him he should get his stuff edited. He's now like number, I don't know, 60 on the Amazon sci-fi list because he wrote 100 of them.
That'll do it.
100 books, 120,000 word books over the period of 3 years. And he's like number 60 on Amazon's science fiction writers list.
Yeah, volume is a powerful earning potential. I got one last question before we sort of wrap things up. You were talking earlier about how you're in contact with your fans and you're sort of asking them questions. What is your favorite way to stay in contact with your audience?
I am open to anything. I love meeting them at conventions. My mailing list, and I've had some very, very moving experiences. I had somebody on my mailing list who, I do Tuckerizations. I ask people if they want me to use their name, and oh my gosh, they love it. And I've had people buy 20 copies of a book, paperback, because their name was used. But I had a guy ask me, he said he was a cook in the British Army, and could I use a cook? So I used a cook, and I used his name. And he kind of grew into a little bit more important character, which I hadn't planned. And all of a sudden I saw that and we'd contacted each other about things, and I saw that he had dropped off my mailing list. And I was shocked. Why would Martin drop off my mailing list? So I wrote him, and his wife contacted me and said that he had passed. And I found out that he'd been bedridden for 3 years. And basically, he just was so excited to write me and everything. And so I thought I'd dedicate one of my books to him. And then I'm kind of choking up a little bit here. His son sent me the 6 pages of the vicar's not the obituary, the funeral. The eulogy, thank you, eulogy. I'm supposed to be a writer. I know those words. Sent me the 6 pages of the eulogy. The last page was about me. He was talking about how much he appreciated meeting this American science fiction writer in Thailand. I was here in Las Vegas by then, but still, this American science fiction writer from Thailand, and how much he'd helped me and helped me develop my books and all this kind of stuff. And it was like someone hit me up the head with a baseball bat. In London, I just presented a copy of the book that I dedicated to him to his family. They drove 3 hours to meet me. And we spent a couple hours together. When we're writers, we're not just, sometimes we think we're just sitting there type, little fairy tales, but we touch people. People read our stuff and it hits them. It means something to them. I talked with another writer this weekend who somebody asked if he could, how is the series going to end, because she had 3 months to live. So he sent her all his notes and everything so she could have that. We as writers touch people. Are we doing anything more important than the person who makes tires for your car? No. But we don't know the name of the person who did that. They know us. Our readers know us. And it's the greatest thing we do. It is absolutely the greatest thing we do. I don't know if I answered your question, but I just sorry.
You definitely did. It was a worthwhile answer.
Yeah, it was a good one.
All right. Well, Jonathan, that's about all we have to ask you. And you're definitely true. It's definitely right that we don't realize the impact we have on other people's lives. And it's really great when they get in touch with us and let us know. Because like you said, sometimes you feel like you're just putting stuff out there into the void, and maybe somebody likes it on Facebook, and the sales are good, so it must be good. But you never know when it can actually affect somebody. It's great to hear about it too as an author. But to wrap things up, why don't you just let us know any projects you're working on, or your novelette? Can I say that correctly? Weaponized Math. Where can people check that out?
You can either find it on The Expanding Universe 3 on Amazon, which was edited by Craig Martell. I think it's 28 stories. It's a huge volume. It costs 99 cents. It will be, or there's a couple places online that I just saw it where they have the link to it. So if you look up Jonathan P. Brazee and weaponized math, I'm sure you'll see some of these links. I think you could find it at jonathanbrazee.com/ maybe weaponizedmath.html or weaponizedmath.docx, or you go to Amazon, and for 99 cents you could get 28 pretty good short stories.
Very cool. And I will put a link in the show notes to is it a Kindle Unlimited one just on Amazon?
Yes, Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited, you could just pull it up anyway.
All right. And that'll be episode 170 for those listening, in case you want to come by marketingsff.com, and I will have the links to your website, your books on Amazon, and the novelette. And I'm just curious, how did you get noticed for the Nebulas? Because I've often wondered, do you have to have something like in a pro magazine or a traditionally published novel to get noticed?
I'm the only indie on this year's ballot, but there have been 2 other indies that have actually, but they were traditionally published who did an indie work. So I'm the first actual indie that's been nominated for Nebula, as far as I can tell. What I did was we created a reading list. So many groups create reading lists, the Clarion people, Clarion West people, Codex. There's a whole bunch of different groups that create a little reading list that people can read for consideration. And we created a reading list with, 35 different things to read, be that novels, short stories, or whatever. And I think that, which had my story on it, and I think that, coupled with people at SFWA who knew me, and the name Weaponized Math was, people have emailed me who I don't even know, saying that they only read it from the SFWA reading list because of the name sounded cool. They didn't know what it meant. I'd like to say I coined that, but I didn't. But I sure used it. So I think a combination of other indies getting together, people seeing the title on the SFWA reading list, and then the people I've met within SFWA being curious as to what I wrote, I think all of that was enough to get them to nominate me. But there's some really good works. I've read all the other novelettes that made the nomination. There's 6 books on the final, 6 novelettes in the final ballot. There are some really, really good ones.
All right. Well, I hope people check it out, and I'll see if I can find a link to how long do people have to nominate and read? Do you know, or to vote before the awards are finalized?
The voting, that's a good question. I don't even know. I've just known the nomination list. I think as of now you can vote because they took off the reading list now. I could look. I'm curious myself because I'm going to read everything, novels to short stories, before I vote. I've read the novelettes. I know each one of those, but the others I've only read 6 or 7, I guess.
All right, very cool. Well, I will,
SFWA if you can.
Yes, I will put the links on there and help people find their way to them. So thank you very much for coming on today, and we really enjoyed having you on there. I promised the guys that we would have a manly man on here after we did a sci-fi romance lady talking about sexy times. So you're our manly man for the male listeners out there.
Well, I appreciate being on here, Lindsay. You know, I admire you so much. You're a great. I love your work, and so it's an honor for me to be on your podcast. And it's great meeting everybody here.
Same here. Nice to meet you, Jonathan. Thanks for all the info.
Nice meeting you.